Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Joey. Let's give it another couple minutes, at least until Shruti gets on, and then we can get started.
Kendall, if there is time available, it would be good to review the status of disclosures and other security work.
Sure. Yeah. Do you mind adding that to the agenda and the wiki?
I will do that.
Thank you.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Shruti.
Hey Kendall. Good morning,
All right.
good evening.
We can go ahead and get started. So first thing on the agenda, I'm just going to share my screen just so everyone can see. So we'll have, I'm sure most of y'all, if not all of y'all, have seen that Hunter Gatewood has resigned his spot on the TSC, which means we have a spot available. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to go through a nomination process and a voting period. So we'll have nomination period will be this week, so today through Friday. And how you'll nominate yourself is just sending an email or a Slack to myself. I can put my email in here so it'll be easy with your name or who you'll be nominating, as well as like a nominating statement, just basically a couple sentences saying why you want to be part of the TSC and any qualifications that would help the code owners with the voting process. If we get one or more candidates, then we'll go to the voting, which will be the code owners will then vote for that one spot available. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And I'll send this all out in a Slack and an email so you have it in writing. All right, then with that, I will pass it over to Shruti with the other topics.
Yeah, so the next item was to discuss on the next release. I believe we've had some discussion over Slack, whether the next release would be 1.7.1 or 1.8. And looking at the complexity of the changes, I think it makes sense to do a major release. Yogesh, Daljit, Govind, I believe you have been tracking this better. So if you want to comment here.
So from ARM point of view, whether it is 1.7.1 or 1.8, there is no difference. So we want to add the support. We are fine in doing the enablement on 1.8. I have to talk to release managers about the timeline. When is that release? But so far the plan is to go on 1.8. Yeah.
So just for clarity, the release manager, like, do you have a release manager from ARM and a release manager from Wave Labs working together, or is one of you taking the lead on here?
This is Oriole and a couple of people. Those contacts I got from Arun.
Okay.
So I think they are from Meta.
So Oriole and Jared were leading the 1.7 release, and that is done. So now we are looking for, and with help, of course, with a lot of help from all other contributors. I believe Yogesh, you are leading the next release. Is that the plan?
Yeah, so Shruti, the Wave Labs team is going to lead this 1.8, right? Because heavily contents are coming from Wave Labs. So what we are looking for is like, do initial set, like start the Slack channel. Maybe we can use rename the 1.71 to 1.8, and then we can have a discussion, like, set up those weekly meetings so that we can kind of start discussing the plan and the process. Like this is the first time we will be leading the release, but at the same time we need some, like, some coordination here, so we can have that kickoff meeting, and then we can have regular follow-up meetings. So that's what we got here.
Okay. And yeah, so I would encourage you to kick off that process so that we can align on timeline and what all needs to go in that release. And I believe so. So to conclude the discussion, it will be 1.8, and Daljit, you would take the lead on planning the weekly sync-ups.
Yeah, so we like, I don't have access to set up the meeting. If like Kendall or you, somebody who can set up the meeting, then me and Yogesh can start driving from our side, and we take input from everybody else from the community and Meta, and we can work together.
Yeah, Daljit, that's actually great. You just let me know what day the meetings are, as well as time and cadence, and I can set that up for you, set up the Zoom and everything, and set it on the community calendar.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So Yogesh, you have any preference? I'm or we can discuss and come back. Let me discuss with Yogesh, then we'll
that
come
sounds
back
good.
to you.
Yep, that sounds good. Just send me a Slack. Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
And in terms of renaming the Slack channel, would it make sense to have a generic Slack channel name like Magma releases, or do we already have one of?
I think that's a good idea, just having a general Slack channel for releases instead of having to rename it each time. And I can update the name in the one that we have now.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, both of you. So the next item on the agenda was Magma roadmap, and I can share my screen here. And before that, I think on the topic of meetings, I had made a comment to the TSC members around the proposal to change the cadence of this meeting from every week to every other week. So the public TSC meeting, we can go back to the bi-weekly format, which we had in the beginning. We moved to a weekly format to catch up on agenda, but I think we can use alternate weeks to do public sync up, and then use 1 week to sync up within the TSC. Other TSC members, if you have any suggestions there, how do you feel about that plan?
It sounds good to me.
Okay. So Kendall, could you make that change, please?
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me move on. The next item I wanted to do is can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yep.
So I added the page for Magma roadmap, and I believe this is the next item that the TSC would be leading in terms of giving guidance to the community around what we are planning for. And I created just, I started with, because we've not done this as a community in the past, like everybody has been planning their own roadmap through different pods on GitHub projects. I was thinking, let's have a common page where we focus on the road one. We're trying to publish 2 things here. One, how do we come up with a roadmap as a community? What's the focus of, 1 second, did I move it? Yeah. What are the priorities? What is the philosophy to do that? And I listed enabling and expanding commercial deployment of Magma, enabling contributors and approvers to build the code base while ensuring code quality. So the first point is more around productization, making it easy for Magma users to consume, and what are the new use cases in the long term. Contributors and approvers is more around developer experience, keeping CI healthy. And the last one is maintaining a periodic cadence of release. Goes back to the release tracking that we are doing, right? And in that context, I put the table in terms of 3 key work streams. And again, feel free to edit this, propose new styles. But one is features, right? What are we building in terms of new capabilities for mobile network to make Magma richer? 2 is what are the DevOps, like our CI, our testing framework, and the 3rd is better engineering, just keeping the code base good and healthy and having good practices. These are the 3 work streams I identified. What do you all think? Like any other way to dissect this? And then we can go into the individual entries in each of these.
So I have a thought. So I think that, first of all, the 3 bullet points, Shruti, that you've put on the top around the enabling commercial deployments and growing the community of contributors and making sure that basically all of that can fit into the cadence of releases are pretty spot on in terms of how we should look at the process of building the roadmap. The biggest challenge that I think, as you know, and that's kind of like my feedback to TSC as a non-TSC member, is to ensure that when we build the roadmap, when it comes particularly to the first bullet point, we proactively solicit feedback from actually organizations that are commercializing Magma in the field. And this is a common problem that I've seen in just other open source projects from prior, is that, you know, you have these like open source committees, and then you have like people doing stuff, and they're not always 100% bridged. And people, you know, using an open source project and building stuff with it oftentimes don't have time to like sit in the committees and like vote. Some subset usually does, but you know, like the bottom of the iceberg is just not visible. So to that effect, my suggestion would be to put some thought into how to properly, you know, what TSC should do to properly, you know, pursue, you know, doing a good job on this first bullet point. And in my view, I think that maybe getting the community to like, you know, list specific organizations that are doing real stuff with Magma in the field, and then maybe some TSC members like reaching out to some of those members and like asking. Maybe it can be like a short written survey, or maybe it can be like a 15-minute phone call, and collecting firsthand input. And also in doing that, it's also important to sort of, I think about, you know, like who the commercialization entity is and what they're doing. Because particularly when it comes to like the telecom projects, like we at FreedomFi, we have a lot of customers that are like doing pilots in the lab, right? They can be like, oh, okay, this is a cool thing, you know, let me poke around and see how this feature works. And we'll do this, you know, pilot. And it's an R&D organization, some big telco is doing it. But the path between this exercise and production can be long. On the other hand, you can have other organizations that could be, maybe not like an AT&T or like a T-Mobile, but like smaller, but are doing stuff that is actually closer to production and more mainstream. So in evaluating the asks, I think it's important to evaluate those aspects as well. And I think that nailing this first bullet point correctly is instrumental to, successful prioritization of the roadmap.
I agree, Boris, on that aspect. But yeah, Freedom-Fi is one of the major contributor in Magma project. There are other, I think, companies who branch off from Magma and fill in feature gaps. So your point is to bring them on board, or the people who are already contributing in Magma project, we have to reach out to them to get their roadmap folded in here.
I think the TSC or members of the TSC have to proactively reach out to, basically the different entities that are commercializing the project. And obviously it shouldn't be just like, us or you. It should we should ideally, like as a TSC, we should gather a list of everybody that is doing commercial deployments of Magma now and collect the feedback.
Right. And yeah, and to that point, Boris, I did reach out to the outreach committee if they can help us gather that feedback. So I think if I understand you correctly, the goal is that people who are deploying Magma in the field today, what's the communication between them and the TSC? What's the channel of, right? And how do we gather their input to guide this roadmap, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Right. And we got that suggestion even in the internal sync up that came up, and one action item I've taken is reached out to the outreach committee and connected them to the folks within Meta to reach out to get a list of Magma consumers, right? We have Magma deployers, if for lack of a better word, and to gather feedback from that. So what TSC needs to figure out is how to streamline that process of the outreach committee right now is Allison, Ildiko, those are the people I'm in contact with who can reach out, who can gather that feedback and convey it back to the TSC. So we need to set up that cadence in a way, or we need to figure out, and this is why I'm proposing an internal sync up even within the TSC members, like how do we keep the communication, the link between the weekly TSC meeting and the other meetings, and make sure we keep funneling information from all these committees to each other, right? So that's a process we'll try to figure out in the course of creating this roadmap.
And the other comment I have is I think that it's probably important for us to set a deadline for when the roadmap's done. So it's not or at least some release process around the roadmap itself, right? So when we want to, at what point do we want to have a V1 of the roadmap for the next 12 months? Or for 6 months or something like that, so that it doesn't turn into a never-ending, just never converging process, and we'll have this kind of fluid, page that people are randomly editing, but it's never quite complete or agreed on.
Right, and I think my opinion there, and this is not really the combined opinion of the TSC at the moment, right? This is the first. This will be the first roadmap we'll build together. But the way I'm thinking about it is the column on the release target is what will give us a sense of timeline. Like once we have a list of things that we want to achieve, we can categorize them into short term, medium term, long term, depending on which release we want to target. And that's because people should be able to add things to the roadmap for like next 3 years, because if they want, if eventually that's something that's on somebody like some contributors roadmap, it should be here. But what are we working on in the short term? That sense of timing, I agree, would come from the release target. And to your point, like having a go-to-market owner or a commercialization owner can figure out what would be the appropriate term for that. And having that owner name specified here will also give a sense of who's doing what and to what end.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Anchoring the features to releases is a good way to do it.
Right. And I think this is just, I mean, like right now it's a table to gather ideas, and maybe there's a better way to represent it in terms of categorizing it based on releases and having a different representation of the roadmap, so it becomes easy to consume for somebody who's not deeply engaged with it. So all those are up for discussion at the moment, and yeah, I agree. We will iron these out in the next few weeks. That is the process, and then we can go about building the actual milestones.
And do you think it's the outreach committee that should be like, who is the outreach committee now, and who is on it? I'm curious. Ildiko and.
Okay, so I can just quickly click here. Kendall, would you be able to comment on that? I know Ildiko is the person.
So the outreach committee should be made up of one representative from each of the premier members and hopefully some of the general members. That as things have kind of been in flux, we haven't been getting as many people joining, but we do have Allison Price from the Open Infrastructure Foundation, which I know you know, who is the chair, and she's been doing all of the work for most part. But she has been getting a few other folks, my names are escaping me right now, that have been helping out, but they are looking for ways to help. So I think this would be something good if they're willing to help with this. This could be something that could help kick off the outreach committee again.
Do you think, Shruti, it would make sense to maybe just, while it seems like the outreach committee is still getting formalized in terms of who the members are and what the roles and responsibilities are, to just like as a first point of like exercise for structuring the roadmap, to agree on certain set of TSC members that will go out and talk to the customers in the field and collect some of the data points?
Absolutely. I think we have folks on TSC who are linked to a lot of deployers directly, right? So
I think that, I think like between us, we can like get 90% of everybody who is doing stuff in production. Just like, you know, we know people at Freedom Fi. I'm sure Wave Labs knows a bunch of people that are doing stuff in production. Meta team has been involved probably in most of the deployments to some extent. I know personally because we've been debriefing like Carlos and team historically on all the production deployments we have in progress and stuff like that. So we can just like gather all up in one place and then have a homework assignment for, I don't know, 2 or 3 TSC members over the next week to go and collect, you know, some data points about those deployments and put the feature asks across the people like that are doing stuff in the field.
Right, that sounds like a good plan. I'm looking around for volunteers to do that. And
I can help lead it. He helped just coordinate the creation of a list and the breaking up of the list, and then a couple of simple, like a short list of survey questions that can either be sent in an email or asked in our call.
That would be great.
That'll be great. Thanks, Joey. Yeah, I would choose email over call so that folks have time to think and just put their responses. And yeah, that would be great.
Joey, this is Lucas. If I can help contribute on kind of a security aspect of what we want to ask, users, I'd be happy to help.
Great. Thanks, Lucas. I'll reach out.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Joey, this is Shubham. So regarding the deployment area, I can also help. So we can work together.
Great.
Right. The other venue I broadcasted this on was on the code owner Slack channel. That folks, what the roadmap essentially is, it's a mix of what we are working on right now and what we are goaling for future. So code owners, in my opinion, would have a good sense of what are the features under development, at what stage they are in. So please, I request everybody here and to reach out to code owners that you on your team to populate the roadmap. At least we should have a good sense of what is the community busy with at the moment and what will become, at least in the short term, what all is part of 1.8. The worst thing we want to do is folks spending time on something and that not being reflected in the roadmap. That's a disservice to the effort everyone is putting in. So please populate the table as thoroughly as possible. Right.
Sure.
Actually, I have a question about that. So when you say populate the table, you're referring to the roadmap table?
Yes.
So
yes, I got lost. Yeah.
What is the process for creating? If we have everyone start throwing stuff in, are we going to create like the kitchen sink list and then prioritize it, rank it, assign it to releases? Is that roughly the flow that we're looking at?
Right. So I think my goal here to capture things like from 5GSA is something that Wavelabs team is currently working on, right? So Yogesh, Daljit, if you would be able to put an owner name here, the status, documentation, right? This is something that's ongoing, so we should definitely capture it. On the DevOps side, Shubham, if you can help populate this section, so I'm not missing. I know go with containerized access gateway, support on ARM is, and maybe I'm not wording it, capturing it
yeah.
appropriately here, and who the owner is, right? So that would go in here. CI health, something that testing framework. These are ongoing efforts, and it would be good to publish who's the owner and what are we targeting for the 1.8 release. So at least we capture what all work is going on. Basal effort, Max, I believe, if you can help populate this, what's the status, what's the documentation, what's the milestone that we're trying to hit for 1.8. And some of these are open, like developer experience. Though all these are broad feats efforts. These are already captured in, like, the one that I've been working with. Radis' team is the C++ migration, and Alex on this call is leading that effort and the general C++ migration. And Radis' team is focusing on the certain sub proposal here, which is in progress. So we still need to sync up whether it would be part of 1.8 or it would be partially 1.8 and then next one. So these are big categories of effort that folks are already working on, and it would be good to have the owners and the status and what are we planning for 1.8. So that becomes that's a low-hanging fruit for the roadmap. But as we gather feedback so I just want to make sure we are capturing the ongoing effort up correctly. And then we also say, okay, what are the new things that would be on the roadmap, and what should we add next, right? So that's the balance I'm trying to strike here. If that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, sounds good.
Right, so that's my ask from current code owners, current contributors, to keep pushing that information into this on this page. And maybe we go back and say, okay, that's too much to consume, and we need to reorganize it and to make it easy to look at the roadmap and make a sense of where we are.
Sure. So I think from Wavelab side, I think in the Magma bi-weekly call, we are having a presentation where we present the, let's say, open effects and the status of ongoing 1.8 PRs. So I think we'll put the link here as well as the status of all the features.
Right, and I think that's the best venue to go and deep dive into what's happening. But yeah, link to that or would make perfect sense here. That
Sure.
This is
Okay.
the ongoing of, like, if somebody wants to dig into more details, it should branch out.
Okay.
Right,
Got
but to us, and I think there are other Linux Foundation projects like ONAP there or other projects have used other status descriptions, like is this under development or maintenance, like the status of this feature is under development or maintenance or planned, right? So I think that it would help to have a list here of what we use to define the status, and I can go back and get a guideline there and use that to start populating the status. So stay tuned. I'll update this page, and we can use a simple list of status options. Right, but documentation and owner is something that we can absolutely start populating right now.
I also feel like it's some point we need to have some sort of prioritizing and ranking process where, like, each of the TSC members goes through, and if we have 10 items ranked their view of the relative importance 1 through 10, and you add them all up and then sort and see what the view of the group is.
Right, and yeah, I think that would be a nice problem to have. Right, so once we have the input coming in, and even from the outreach committee or from the Magma deployers have that feedback. So I think once we have a fuller table, that would be the next exercise we can do, because it would be hard to bundle everything in a single release, right? So depending on what's realistic and how do we prioritize what for which release, that would be a discussion to have at that point.
Right, and also my understanding is that one use of the Magma TSC created roadmap is to help select grant proposals. And so if we don't have some collective view of the priority and relative importance, it's not going to help with the grant selection approval process.
Right. Right. That would, yeah, and I think the roadmap will serve as a guideline for the TSC, as well as the governing, giving a picture to the governing board, like what is the priority or what is the where is the project going, right? So absolutely.
What are, Shruti, your views on the timeline for having like a V1 of the usable roadmap? What are the thoughts on this from you and I guess other TSC members?
I think from my opinion, I think we are still a few weeks out. And today's call is to reach out to as many folks as possible to start putting their thoughts that it's basically kickstarting the road discussion. And next Monday, the TSC can sync up internally on how to streamline this process, and then we would be able to comment on a target date. So I would snooze that answer until next Monday.
Okay.
Boris, what I can share from ARM point of view, the clear roadmap is to run Magma on different form factors, right from AWS instance all the way till Raspberry Pi. And we should be able to run this containerized AGW on any ARM device. So that is our high priority work item, and we want to put a roadmap for that.
I'm sorry, say that again. What's the, I missed the comment, so.
No, I said, so we want to enable this containerized AGW in Magma repo. Currently, it is not supported on any ARM device as is. So we want to enable that so that any developer can run those containerized image on any ARM device, be it AWS Graviton 2 instance or a Raspberry Pi, the same container image should work. So that is our high priority work item, and we want to enable ARM CI in Magma. So these are the two high priority items for us.
Got it, okay.
And what is FreedomFi's roadmap, Boris? So like for the next 2 quarters. So you look at the feature gaps to commercialize it. Or do you see any gaps based on your customer experience?
Yeah, I think that probably the biggest gap is the outbound roaming. And then there is a number of other items. I think that,
I mean, you can look at the list of grant proposals that we put forward, and that's a pretty clear indicator of the gaps that we see priority to fill. So it's the extensions to inbound roaming so that it is commercially deployable as opposed to just lab deployable. It's the outbound roaming. I think those are the two big like clusters of work.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Julie.
yeah, so like from our standpoint, the philosophy generally that we have is, you know, there are some like big gaps related to inbound, outbound roaming, and a few other minor things that effectively are required to make Magma what we believe to be like a feature complete core that can be used for, you know, a variety of use cases. Because of where the project is and its current state of maturity, I don't think that we are in the position where we can like go and, for example, you know, replace an Ericsson or a Nokia core, which means that for the foreseeable future, from the standpoint of, you know, like people using it in the field, most likely you're going to be like filling in gaps of coverage or using it for like private LTE type use cases. And as such, it's a very important requirement to have the ability to, roam in and out of other operator cores. And, we have basically a number of needs in the field and customers that are aching for that functionality to be there. So that's why we think that this is an important priority.
Okay. Thanks, Boris.
So I think as a next step, Joey, you're going to take the lead on gathering feedback from the deployers and on the feature gaps, the pain points, and we can work with other TSC members to reach out to those folks, and we can use that as an input to the roadmap. Right. Okay.
I'm actually working on a Confluence page right now in the TSC Confluence to collect it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Shruti, this is Murthy Hariharan from Viasat. We are one of the deployers of Magma. We'll be really happy to participate in this and provide whoever who wants inputs into what we see is required in the roadmap and from a greenfield operator perspective. So we'll be happy to work with anybody on this team and provide those inputs. Just reach out to us and we'll be very happy to do that.
Great. Great. Joey, would you serve as the point of contact? Can you do that?
Yeah, I can absolutely reach out to Marthy.
And I think I also want to, we are not a TSC member, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But we do have, as you know, we are using a greenfield operator, and the points that Boris made on introducing basic roaming and mobility into the product or this foundation's product is very important because that completes the ecosystem. It is not a private network. We have to reach out to the rest of the world and connect to public networks, basically. So we have the right interfaces, and I think the challenge is to connect those interfaces up to these public networks. That is what we are finding. In short, that's what we are finding in our deployment.
Thanks for bringing that up, Murthy.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so that's all from my side on the roadmap. Any other comments from others? If not, we can move on to security disclosures, Lucas.
Okay, thank you for this time. I am going to share my screen. The substance of this issue is that IP spoofing allows an attacker to do whatever another subscriber could do. And Yogesh examined it. Yogesh, are you here?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about it a little bit, or should I summarize?
Sure. So I think in the last meeting, we discussed that there is a possibility where an attacker can forge the billing information, especially if he has somehow get the IP address of the subscriber. So what meaning that information will be collected from the OVS. But right now, what we are doing is we are basically using both tunnel ID and IP address to identify the sessions. So that will not be very easy to spoof, meaning just alone the IP address and fake the billing. So that information I have provided. And also I have reached out to Praveen Scheller just to know what is his thoughts. So I think if these two identifications are there in place, So I think we are covered with it. Eventually, maybe once the IPsec is there, we might not need it. But I think even if that is not in place, I think basic things we are covered with. So IP address spoofing alone will not cause the subscriber billing to go up. It has to be tunnel also, and both are generated at different places. So tunnel will be from GNB, and IP address will be from AMF. So it will be a little difficult to spoof it. So that's what I put in the comments, and I'm discussing with Praveen Scheller also for his feedback.
I agree with your perspective. I think the combined difficulty of spoofing the IP address and the tunnel ID is probably prohibitive compared to the the benefit to the attacker. I think it's important to be aware that the combination of these two successful attacks would amount to escalation, but the ROI is unlikely to work out. So I think we should close this. What are people's thoughts?
We also have Nick on the TSC, who's a data path expert. Nick, do you have any comments here?
The comment that Yajish made makes sense to me. The two identifiers seem enough.
Cool. So the next item, unsafe CC++ operations. This is kind of a cookie cutter issue that has to do with third-party libraries using unsafe standard library procedures. Yogesh looked into it and found that do you want to talk about it, or should I summarize? What's your preference?
Yeah, you can summarize. I think maybe if you can open the link, the attachment.
Yes, here it comes. Text files and Firefox don't get along well for difficult to understand reasons. Okay, so I'm sorry, this is the wrong window. I apologize for misusing time. I actually do have a window prepared for this. The gist of it, are people seeing the unsafe functions screen right now?
It's just, oh yes.
Okay.
Now we see text highlighted does not check for buffer overflows.
So the gist of what was discovered was that all examination tools didn't come up with results. Only this one did find anything. But my feeling is that we should examine the substance of these. Like this may be real. It could be a fair amount of trouble to fix in all these instances. That's a lot of these things, but it's worth looking closer, and they look all pretty similar. There aren't that many different items, right? Like this is kind of roughly, this is the same thing. So I think it's worth looking more closely. What are people's thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this, I just ran on one folder of OEI. I think we have to run, this list might be a little bit big if I run for other folders, but I thought it will be good to give a gist of especially the overflow. So meaning all other static analyzers like CPP check, I think almost no one is reporting it. It is just this flaw finder. And mostly it is been flagged in Microsoft. I think there's a tool which reports it. Yeah, so of course, people are saying it's just if you use correctly, no problem. But yeah, I think that's where the challenge is. We have to make sure that all the inputs are correct. So yeah, so there are two questions. One is what should we do with the existing ones? And going forward, what we will do once a new code submission comes in.
Agreed. I think we need to find out that flaw finder is accurate in this case and isn't over reporting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, correct.
Okay, so the next step is and how about if you and I collaborate to do that? Does that seem like
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so the next item, we got a disclosure on mlog. I think it was inaccurate. The substance of the disclosure is right here. Mlog Vita 3.1 has full path for disclosure in this index.php file. I think that what's happening is that this security researcher is finding vulnerability notices and then hunting in GitHub for instances of them. And I think that he wrote some code to do that, and it had a bug and auto submitted a disclosure to us that was inaccurate. What are people's thoughts? Do we use mlog? Does anybody else know of the existence of this code? Okay, so I don't want to go into too much fine-grained detail. I know there's a lot of people here examining stuff that may not be the best use of time. If you know of anything, let me know, and then I'll skip to the next item.
Lucas, regarding this Artifactory 22 port, so
Yeah.
we are actually migrating it. Currently, it's self-hosted, so we are migrating it to open infra setup. So maybe this will be resolved in future.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's in the Artifactory item, but I'm not aware of any mlog of this actually existing in our code base. Is that false? Does anybody know if that is false?
I don't think we have any PHP code. It says like PHP.
Yeah, right. So I hunted the repo for PHP code, which is a very simple project, and didn't find any. So I think this is a bug in this researcher, and we should draw the conclusion that this researcher's reports are somewhat unreliable. We should take them with a grain of salt. Next item, I think Joey researched this, and he was going to comment here.
Yeah, if you refresh, it'll actually post the comment I just posted this morning. We looked into this, and the feature is enabled by default from the Magma project. It lets you perform 3 functions. However, when we tried to actually trigger any of those 3, we were unable to like use keyboard shortcuts like during the boot sequence, like at the prompt, to actually trigger any of them. So we feel like, yes, it is enabled, but it doesn't seem to quite work. So the current risk is relatively low. Nonetheless, we are going to disable it, and our image is and submit a PR to have it disabled by default in the upstream project.
I think disabling it is the right choice, since we don't know why it isn't working. An attacker might be able to determine.
Right. Yeah.
So
We'll probably have a PR in the next week or two, and we will update the issue when it's ready.
So the disclosure guidelines require us to name a target release. And so I wonder, what is the target release for that PR?
Have we chosen what we're going to call the next release? Whatever comes after 1.7. It's either 1.7.1 or 1.8.
1.8.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm about to run out of time. Sorry, if anybody else wanted to jump in there. So let me call out, the next thing I'm going to do is review all the ongoing security projects. These generally came out of the OpenSSF scorecard, and so people will start seeing these items surfacing in priority, and I would welcome thoughts and improvements and ideas. And that may have an influence on the roadmap, as well as the research of projects using Magma may also have an influence on the roadmap. And I would really very much welcome thoughts on where security fits in the roadmap. That's it for me.
So Lucas, what you're pointing to one issue at the end, or are you pointing us to the list of open disclosures? I can understand.
The issue I was pointing at was the ticket for tracking the OpenSSF security scorecard, which revealed about 5 things that we needed to look at, including, for example, pinning actions. And that goes to sort of our larger roadmap for security and our larger thoughts and goals and requirements.
Okay, so yeah, I think I can take an action item on that and work on that with the TSC and to put it on the roadmap.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Anything else on the mind of folks?
Shruti, we have a quick question on this roadmap you put up there, right? There's a network slicing feature in there. So we will have submitted a couple of proposals for this. So we were like just wondering, like, what's the source behind this, like, from your perspective?
So I think I put it there as a placeholder for long-term features, and I'm just looking at feedback from here and copying it over from the previous roadmap that was discussed, that was present in some slides to the governing board around network slicing. What the current TSC needs to gauge is, do we have owners to take it to market and to develop? And if that makes sense, we put it on a release target, right? So I think it has to come together in that sense, right? Is there an ask for it? Are there resources for it? And maybe in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months. So keeping it putting that question to the community here.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can end the call. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks on the public call. I think Kendall has already updated the invite, so stay tuned and just let's work on the roadmap together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.